One question was, December 2019, you gave us a bit of a forecast into what 2020 was going to be like, and you said it was going to be nuts. And you gave us advice on how to navigate through. What would be your forecast for energies for 2021? Are things going to be more nuts, or are we going to see the Great Awakening and the shift happen this year?
As we have said, you are still going through the eye of the needle, probably to the end of 2023 or somewhere within that year before things really start to change. So the idea is to maintain the bubble of energy, the state of being that we have recently delivered to you, called high honesty, integrity, gratitude, and humility, that will carry you through while you're also, during this process, continuing to let go of those fear-based belief systems that may hold you back, that may not allow you to go through the passage of the eye of the needle as smoothly as you could. This is a transition time, and therefore take advantage of it to take the time, because once things really do start to accelerate toward more of the idea of awakening and open contact in and around or after 2023, then there won't necessarily be the same advantage of time that you have right now to take advantage of, to streamline yourself so that you can experience the changes that are going to happen in a more accelerated way after the eye of the needle passage in an easier, more effortless way. So take advantage of this time now to continue going through the process of letting go of those things that don't serve you.
And the second question is, the most popular question in this list of Ustream questions is asking for an energy reading of the rest of 2021. What beliefs are beneath that desire to know what is going to happen before it happens?
There can be both a positive and a negative aspect to this, the negative side being that you're not necessarily trusting the way things unfold. It's really more about focusing on your own state of being and knowing that if you focus on your own state of being, that it is where you prefer it to be, making the choices that you prefer that are in alignment with who you are, in your true self, your true essential self, then it won't really matter to you what it is that happens, because as we have said, it doesn't really matter what happens if you're in the proper state of being. You'll always be able to use it to your advantage. It'll only matter what you do with what happens, not about what happens in and of itself. Because even if something happens that you might objectively observe is negative, it won't affect you negatively if you remain in the state of being that is representative of your preference. So the idea is that you're becoming more sensitive on the positive side to recognizing what it is ahead of time that you're setting up that might be more highly probable to manifest. And because you're becoming more aware of what it is that might happen, the idea, nevertheless, is to not become fixated on needing to know what will happen. So it's a balancing act, as usual, between becoming more sensitive to the idea of what might manifest when you make certain different kinds of choices, and not necessarily needing to know exactly what will manifest, so that you can leave some leeway for your higher mind and synchronicity to bring you what you need in the form in which you truly need it that will serve you best, so that you don't become too fixated and insistent on what that form needs to actually look like. So again, a combination of beginning to become more sensitive about knowing what it is that's more likely to happen because of your state of being, and also not necessarily insisting that it has to happen exactly as you might imagine it at this moment.
Thank you.
Yes.
What is creating the phenomenon we're experiencing now on Earth, where it is so hard to discern what is true from what is false?
Well, the only reason that would be difficult is because most people are not necessarily exercising what you might typically refer to as common sense. The idea is there are things that can be presented in such an exaggerated way that you would, in a normal common sense situation, take a step back and ask yourself whether or not what you're being presented with has a high degree or a low degree of probability of being accurate. So the idea is to always maintain your balance, your center, and view things that are presented to you in a way that allows you to know what is really being presented in an extreme manner and what is closer to the idea of a centered, balanced point of view, and what is really highly probable or less likely to be probable. In other words, what is really more likely or less likely to be true in your language. The idea is to exercise that common sense by coming from a more balanced state, which gives you better ability, better discernment to tell the difference between what in a sense really serves you and what might be representative of something that is outside the parameters of the reality that you prefer.
And this is sort of a continuation where the person is saying, I'm confused whether I should keep seeking and searching for truth through the internet about what's going on, and especially during this critical time in world events. I think I resonate with, but I'm not sure. And then sometimes I get so disturbed by some of the fake or manipulative information. I'm wondering, is my ego driving this? Should I just stop searching and getting information from the internet and just let everything go?
Well, again, as many of you know, the way that your internet works is that whatever it is you do focus on for even a little while will activate certain algorithms that will continue to present you with that kind of information, and therefore it can reinforce whatever it is you've already been searching for, whether it's positive or negative. So the idea is to, again, be aware of the fact that that happens. It doesn't mean you have to stop listening to any input, but be aware that things are being tailored to what it is you may have already started searching for, so that you can, again, take a little bit of a step back and really ask yourself, no matter what information you're presented with, how likely is this to be accurate? So the idea, again, is that, remember, you can only perceive what you're the vibration of. So every chance you get, step back, go into a neutral state, a balanced state, a central state, and then you can be more capable of discerning whatever it is you just heard or listened to or saw as to whether it fits the parameters of the vibrational state you're in as a more centered being. You'll be able to tell as you practice constantly going back into the centered state, no matter what it is you're listening to, as to whether what you just heard really fits that central balanced state or not.
And then this individual says that it asks, is it necessary to see dark forces like evil in order to ascend to higher consciousness? This person has delved into conspiracy theories because it just looks like it's there in his timeline. And I know there's a split, but what if my observation of negativity hinders my path of what I prefer? Do I pray for these dark forces to have the option to choose light? I don't want to get sucked into a bad timeline of being controlled because I'm fearful and I'm observing it.
As we have often said, just because you can observe it doesn't mean you're in that reality. And just because you can observe it doesn't mean that it affects you, because you're the one that decides what affects you with your belief system. The very idea that you're worried that you might, as you say, get sucked into it is part of the negative vibrational energy that a negative reality would want you to buy into. So the idea is, don't buy into the idea that an observation is an automatic entrainment. If you, again, stay balanced and centered with what you know is true for you, you will realize that as you expand your consciousness, you're not going to become less aware of the potential for negative choices. You'll become more aware of the potential for negative choices, but you'll also understand that it's nothing more than a potential. It doesn't affect you until you actually choose it. Now, if you feel like you're out of touch with your belief systems, that many of the fear-based belief systems within you are unconscious, and that those unconscious beliefs may in some way get you to choose those negative things without you knowing what you're doing, well, again, remember that if you're constantly checking in with yourself, then you will course correct as you go. The people that get caught up deeply in the idea of fear-based realities and negative conspiracy theories are usually the ones that don't bother to check in with themselves as to whether they're getting caught up in it. So as long as you're constantly going back to center and checking within yourself to say, does this really resonate with me? And this central position in this balanced point of view, does this really resonate with me or does it not? As long as you keep checking in, you will course correct. You will make decisions then that won't matter what it is you're seeing. You will know whether it fits you or not more clearly by coming from that balanced state and by constantly checking yourself to make sure that you are course correcting. Again, the people that simply fall, as you say, head over heels or hook, line, and sinker into things that are not necessarily in alignment with who they truly are, never really stop to bother and check themselves to see whether or not they're going too far in one direction or another. But everything contains positive and negative energy on every level. So as you expand, you'll become more aware of the negative as well as the positive, but you'll also become more aware that you can choose what you prefer without invalidating what you don't.
Expanding on that, this individual says, I'm seeing more and more control methods. Some I knew as a child, at least it was from my perspective. Does this mean I just have to heal within? If I see control mechanisms outside of me, do I have an issue with control inside me? And if so, how do I heal that? I've tried changing my beliefs, but I'm still seeing control mechanisms.
Then if you are changing your beliefs, and still see other people creating control mechanisms, then why not just assume it's a neutral observation as opposed to falling into the worry that somehow it's going to affect you or going to be representative that you might still have negative fear-based beliefs within you. Again, you have the choice to always make sure you're clear within yourself. But just because you're clear within yourself, remember that you are in a time and place of transformation on your planet where just because you might be clearer doesn't mean you're going to immediately stop seeing other people making choices that are vibrationally incompatible with you. This is going to continue for a little while. Eventually, in the years down the road, you will generally no longer perceive things or people that are making choices that are not compatible with the reality that you've chosen. But that's not going to happen for a little while because you have to practice getting used to the idea in this transformational age of being capable of seeing things that are not your preference and learning to not react to them, learning not to take it personally, learning not to assume that there's something going on within you all the time. Again, in honesty, you always have the opportunity to check within yourself and say, well, is this something about my own belief system? Or is this simply my ability to neutrally observe that other people are choosing things that I don't prefer? Again, the more you practice being in the center and in balance, you'll have eventually the discernment to tell the difference as to whether it's your issue or their issue. And if you understand it's simply their issue, then you're doing nothing more than observing someone else. And by being a living example of being your true self, then you, yes, are giving them an opportunity to see, in looking at you, the possibility that they might be more capable of choosing the option to be more of themselves. Not that they have to. But the idea is the more you're centered within your own being and understand that your observations aren't immediately to be assumed to affect you in any way, shape, or form that you don't choose to be affected by, then you can become an example to give them, with your compassion, an opportunity in seeing you and maybe making choices that might be more positive for them. But you can
Fear.
Yes, fear is common on your planet, but one thing I would suggest is that you stop referring to these ideas as a common thread, because that only reinforces the idea that you can't step outside of it.
Okay. And this question is, you told us that God is all there is, or is all that is, and that it is existence itself. Yeah. Could you explain how evil and darkness fit into this? Now, maybe you already...
In a sense, yes. Earlier. We have already addressed this, and we wouldn't again use the concept or the label you're calling evil. We focus on the idea that there is positive and negative energy, positive being integrative and expansive and connective, and going more in the alignment of flow, with existence because it is slightly more in the positive direction than negative, because there's always a balance point in the center that gives you the freedom to choose. And the freedom to choose is a positive thing. So in a sense, existence is bent slightly in the positive direction. The idea of evil may simply be an insistence on continuing to express and choose and act out of the idea of misalignment, of negative energy, which is segregative, disconnective, inexperience, and diminishing. So the idea is that a continued persistence or insistence on the idea of continuing to go out of alignment and take actions that are also designed to promote the idea of misalignment in that way. If you want to say that that's evil, well, all right, but that's really just a value judgment. Remember that the idea of evil is just live backwards, or live backwards. So the idea, if you want to play a game with words, is to recognize that evil is simply not really living to your true potential. So the idea of negative and positive energy, in a mechanical sense, is a little bit more discerning about what it is a person is doing instead of just falling under the label of evil. Because it's really that everyone is made of existence. Everyone is, in a sense, supported unconditionally with love. So the idea is that everyone is attempting to align with that love, but many people may not understand how to do so because they've never been taught how to do so. So even though they may be acting negatively, the basic intention of the soul is to align with all that is. They just may not be very good at it.
Right, because the question completed with, is evil part of God?
Everything is part of God. There's no such thing as anything that's not. But that's why we're saying it's not really about labeling it as evil, but understanding that within existence there is always positive and negative.
And so for, according to science, some people are born without empathy, so-called psychopaths. Yes. Others inflict pain because they've been traumatized themselves.
Yes.
How is this possible? How is this possible if we're all made out of love?
Well, again, you have the freedom to choose. If you weren't unconditionally loved, you wouldn't have the freedom to choose. So the idea is that choices are made either from the spirit level for certain thematic explorations or from within the experiences of physical reality that determine what kind of choices you will make. So remember, when you say you're all made out of love, well, yes, in a sense that's true, but being made out of love gives you the freedom to choose how you want to express that, either positively or negatively, because it can be done either way. That's what unconditional love means. It's unconditional.
And so when we're out of balance in some way, for example, feeling extreme physical pain or living in poverty or experiencing loss or devastation or total emptiness, it's almost impossible to find anything to be excited about in order to follow the formula when you're in that state. At those times, we keep matching the frequency we don't want, and what we don't want is what we keep getting back. How can we shift our frequency at those moments of total despair?
First and foremost, by understanding that it can be looked at as being there as a lesson that can allow you to experience something other than that. If you don't have the capacity or the learning or the teaching or the wherewithal to discover within yourself that everything that happens can be used to learn a lesson in a positive way, then yes, you may have created a reality where you don't even necessarily have the awareness that it can be used that way, and you can feel trapped. But nevertheless, the idea of even saying that it is simply too difficult to find your way out of it is what reinforces the difficulty in finding your way out of it. So first and foremost, no matter what your state of being, no matter how negative or hopeless it may seem, to understand that it is only the product of what you believe to be true, and to not heap upon yourself more difficulty by assuming that it is more difficult than it needs to be, by understanding that it is only the product of a belief, by understanding that anything can be used as a lesson in a positive way to allow you to experience something else. by being honest within yourself, by looking around the world and seeing examples of others who are doing things that you would also prefer to do, and knowing that you wouldn't be capable of seeing them at all if you weren't capable of it as well. Looking at those things that are positive and knowing that's part of your reality too, and not just being mired down in the idea of what you're experiencing immediately and only within a very narrow set of parameters. If you're willing at all to expand your vision to see that you can be aware of other things other than what you're experiencing, then that should be your first clue that you can divest yourself of the experience that you're having if you understand the reason why you may have co-created it to begin with.
And then when one is in a time of being emotionally devastated, and since there is no such thing as time,
there is the experience of time, even though time itself is a creation and a side effect.
I think the concern was if time's not real and you're in a state of devastation, does that mean that you'll be in that state of devastation forever? Because,
No.
Right.
You won't experience it that way. There will always be some version of reality that experiences devastation. But remember, when you say forever, that's a temporal label. And in a sense, there is only here and now. So in a very real way, even though things exist and can't not exist, saying things last forever is an illusion. Because forever is an illusion. Because there is only here and now. So we understand that this can seem extremely paradoxical to beings that are focused in a space-time reality. But nevertheless, in a sense you could say, things always are, but nothing lasts forever. And we apologize if this seems confusing, but that's the way it is.
Well, when you talked about the film strip analogy and the idea that each frame is there, but it's frozen and it's activated by consciousness, right?
In a sense, yes, and therefore you get to choose the frames by choosing what you believe to be true. So while the frames are, in a sense, there forever, the frame you're experiencing isn't. It changes billions of times per second. Otherwise, you wouldn't be experiencing the idea of time. So in a sense, the experience of time is your first clue that you don't have to experience things forever, because by the fact that you're experiencing time at all means you're shifting billions of times a second, and you're never in the same state. You're never in the same reality, even though you may experience it that way by creating the illusion of continuity.
And in the structure of existence, change is the only constant, right?
Your relationship to the structure is what always changes. And in that sense, yes. Although obviously the structure is constant in its own way, that's not what determines your experience of it. Your perspective of it, your relationship to it, your belief about it, is what changes your experience of the structure that never changes.
And when you say, are there some parts of our reality that cannot be changed by the individual because they're created by the collective and can't be overridden?
Yes, because you've agreed to play by certain rules. There may be a lot of leeway, a lot more leeway than many of you have been taught to believe is possible. And so you can certainly explore what is relevant for you to experience that might make it very different than the general consensus reality. But there's a lot of flexibility in the consensus, especially in this day and age of transformation. But there are certain things that you don't need to have changed, that aren't relevant for you to change, because if you change them, then you wouldn't be, in a sense, playing the same game at all. So while you have made the choice to play a certain game, or as we often say, walk down a certain hallway, and that hallway will remain because you are that hallway. This personality is that theme, is that destiny, because it's unique. There are many things you can do within that hallway. Walk, run, crawl, fly, happy, sad, look at all the doors, ignore them all. You have the freedom to explore the hallway with a lot of leeway, but you will explore the hallway because that's what you agreed to do as this personality experience. You are the hallway. And therefore, even though you change the expression of the personality, the unique perspective you are as an identity, as a reflection of all that is, that doesn't change. So when you say, this is how I'm going to experience my true identity with this personality structure to explore this theme in this game of Earth, in physical reality, that's what you're going to experience. But like the game of chess, even though you've agreed to play by the rules of chess so that you know you're playing chess and not checkers, or some other game with a different set of rules, there are still a lot of things you can do differently within playing the game of chess in terms of the kind of pieces you use, what they're made of, what your strategy is, so on and so forth. So a lot of flexibility, but you're going to play the game of chess because that's what you agreed to play.
And one of the key things when you're dealing with your theme is whether or not something's relevant, as you mentioned. So you can always fall back on, if something isn't manifesting, it may not be relevant.
At least not at that moment.
Right.
Because again, remember, there are two types of synchronicity. There's the synchronicity that brings you opportunities to act on that become obvious as part of your path. And there's the synchronicity that says, no, this is not part of your path, at least right now, and therefore that synchronicity actually prevents you from being able to move forward in a certain direction that isn't you. So the idea, that's why we always say, is make sure you're clear within yourself that you're not the one blocking yourself from going down a certain path. But if you're clear that you're not really doing anything or have a belief that you're holding on to that's stopping you, then you have to know that synchronicity itself is telling you this isn't your path right now. Go in another direction you're capable of acting on that represents your passion. And maybe you'll come back to this, but right now, synchronicity is guiding you